Well, greetings and salutations to the 310 tribe. If you guys can hear me and see me, give me a thumbs up. All right. Hey, Carol, it's good to see you. Oh, my goodness. Let's see. I see Misha, my mom's on, Coco Bear, Julie, Kelly, Caterlin, Brandy, Francis, Sue, Edward. Who else? Watcher for Jesus. I thought I was closer to the top. James, Jacqueline, Beverly. Hey, everybody. So good to see everybody. Apologize for taking the break I did. Much needed. Ashley, I see you. Old Man Ed, Hannelore, Lisa. Hey, Lisa. Will G, Donna, Diane, Christine, Stacy, Jan Fuller. So good to see everybody. And Jack from Alaska, Shelly. You know, Jack, I had a dream the other day that I got sent to Alaska for work. I was like, I woke up from that dream. I was like, what? And I was so sure that it was true that I was just like, I've got to check my phone to make sure it's not true. But anyways, good to see everybody here. And just before we get started, let me do some admin notes real fast. And I'm kind of in a weird mood right now because I have some mixed emotions. I'm just coming off the bitter sting of defeat. I just got crushed tonight in the game of Mexican Train and Dominoes. But it's also like an amazingly positive, joyous day because my prayer after 2 years has finally got answered. So I did get that job in Denton, which means I can stay closer to home. And so thank you guys for praying for that. That has been like a long time coming. And anyways, I'm joking about the bittersweet defeat thing, but yeah, I did get crushed pretty bad in Mexican Train. So good news is I will be staying here locally, until the Lord comes back, hopefully. So thank you guys for that, because I know the Lord does answer prayers. And sometimes not right away, but it's always in His time, and I think that everything will work out according to His plan. All right. Next thing is I will be on Thursday with Pastor Kurt Reed on his channel. I think that's Thursday the 30th, so the day prior to Halloween, from 2 to 4 Central Standard Time. So I guess if you live in the Pacific, it's I don't know, 12 to 2 or something. The time zones always throw me off. But and then I'm also kind of thinking I might run a live stream on Friday, Halloween. I'm not 100% sure yet. We'll see how Thursday goes. But and also there's so much news happening. It might be warranted, 3 times this week. So yes, Linda, I'm back in Texas. So finally. Hey, Brooke, Tyson, Akira, Jonathan. Man, it has been such a long time. So I was busy all day today, looking at places and stuff. So, okay. Catalin says Maranatha is Thursdays at noon Pacific for Pastor Kurt. Awesome. Well, I want to talk about tonight quite a bit of things. And if you bear with me, I will let me read this monologue real quick because it's going to set the tone for kind of everything else we do. It says, and I'm quoting here from Sir John Glubb, The Fate of Empires. The life of nations, like that of men, is limited. History seems to indicate that great nations, like individuals, are born, they grow up, and decay. And I think right now we're standing on the precipice of great change. At one end, the conclusion of one epoch and the dawning of another one. Civilization itself is shifting beneath our feet, and I think we can all feel that. And I think that when you get into these times of great transition, we underestimate the magnitude of grind that life and reality puts on us. And I think you guys can all sense that, just the grinding of the world against, our happiness, our joy, our relationships, our finances, our mental health, our emotional health, everything. I mean, it is grinding us down, and it's designed to do that. And so I want to talk about what some of these factors are. And the first is that we have to understand that we're in the middle of transitioning between one industrial revolution into the next. And in this period of time where things are transitioning, it feels like things are changing faster than most of us can keep up with, especially when it comes to technology. And when you think about the third industrial revolution, that was really the age, from say the 60s and 70s onward, where things became more electronic, and we were now doing some of the work with robots and some of the work with computers and stuff. And we were just getting into the internet at the tail end of the third industrial revolution. Now we're moving into the fourth, and that's where everything is moving into what we call the cyber physical age, where everything's biometrics, everything is moving digital. Things that traditionally weren't digital, like currency, now is almost entirely current. It's almost entirely digitalized now. If you listen to Pastor Gary a lot from Victory Church in Belfast, he talks about this tokenization, and that's where everything is really being driven to. Anything that can be quantified or qualified digitally is. And if anything that can have the internet put or connected to the internet is being put into it. So it is causing, especially for the older generations who are not able to keep up with just the amount of change and how fast it's changing. I'm telling you right now, I'm 51 and I'm struggling with it, and I'm a product of, the 80s, 90s, and 70s, 80s, and 90s, where I was exposed to. I can't really use me as an example. I didn't get online until 97. I didn't even know what email was until 97. So, anyways, I have just some. It is a period of great transition that we're in, and that causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress and a lot of tension, and a lot of things. So that's one aspect of this. And the second part of this is the American-led world order that has really defined the world since 1945 is giving way to this new multipolar reality. And and it's not like one other nation is rising up, but you have geopolitical and economic alliances that are starting to burgeon, and they're starting to threaten the American hegemony that we've had since World War II. And not only them, but the European Union, BRICS, even the Abraham Accords, and these things are all driving the power of the region or the power of the alliance over the individual nations, and the individual nations are being trampled underfoot and being forced into these kind of things for their own survival, and that presents a certain degree of tension and anxiety and stress. And because it increases things like immigration, it removes jobs, it moves one manufacturing center from one country and puts it in another where they can do it for half the price. And then that causes issues back home, because now that manufacturing industry is gone. The industry your parents might have had growing up, and you might have inherited that, or just because of where you live, it may have been the only factory in town, and now that factory is in Guatemala or in China or somewhere else, and that causes its own level of economic stressors on any kind of society or community. And really, the powers that be are trying to jockey and maneuver amongst these other world leaders so that they don't feel like their country is left behind. So everybody is kind of in this race, and it's in the citizenry, the average citizen is who is being trampled underfoot when it comes to all of this that's taking place. And the third aspect that we're seeing is this kind of this slow grinding down of civilizations. And it's not just Western civilization is kind of grinding to a halt, because the American-led world order has really dominated Western civilization. Well, if we are suffering under this transitions into the fourth industrial revolution and into a post US dominant world, all these other empires are going to feel it too. Russia's in decline economically. They're barely hanging on. Their population is irrecoverable. They've been turned into this global pariah over the conflict in Ukraine. China's economy is really a paper tiger. It has none of the safety features or structures undergirding it to keep it strong like we have. And the reason China's issues is so dire is because when you think about the United States, we didn't gain our wealth overnight. Our wealth took decades and centuries to develop. And in that process, we learned when we failed and we made mistakes, and then we built in safeguards to correct those mistakes. And all of that stuff it just takes time and experience to learn from those things and to build those safeguards in there. When China when they were given the most favored nation status in the 90s under the Clinton administration, they went from being like dirt poor, agriculturally based, economy to just the economic powerhouse overnight. None of those safeguards are in place. So when things start to go bad, they go bad very quickly and they go bad very severely. And they don't have any of the safeguards in place for their elderly populations. This young generation are like I call it, or what they call violin. They don't. It's like this this silent protest where they are just not going to do anything anymore. Like they're just giving up because what's the point? And so at the top, China's president Xi Jinping has basically removed any threat to his challenge, any threat challenging his leadership. And he keeps doing these kind of purges. And the first time he did these purges, it was from the previous leaders, his people that he had put in power. Xi Jinping comes in, he purges all those guys out, and then he brings in guys that are now loyal to him. But now he's purging those guys out. So he's purging out his own people that he brought in. So he's removed so many different people that there's no, if something were to happen to him, there is no clear leadership as to who would take over China. And that, when you have something like that, there's a fight for power, and you could see a massive kind of collapsing of China as a powerhouse in the world. And then the last kind of group that I would put into this category is United Nations. I think right now, as an organization, we've come to realize how feckless and really ineffective they are as a organization. When you've got like these human rights committees that are chaired by some of the worst violators of human rights, Iran and Russia and other groups kind of leading these, it's pointless, and it's absolutely not. It is not making making their case in terms of their legitimacy. They're a joke now. So I think something has got to give with the United Nations. And then the fourth thing is that technology is no longer advancing in steps. Even if it's very rapid steps, it's going exponentially. It's leapfrogging so fast that people are not able to keep up with it. Leaders, the industry itself is not able to keep up with it and keep up with the ethos and how we should develop artificial intelligence. When you look at a country like China, they're going to develop artificial intelligence based on their worldview, and Russia is going to develop artificial intelligence based on their worldview. And then the US or the West, every country is going to develop these programs that best benefits them. And so if you have a country like China, which has no problem, throwing people in prison for life over minor infractions, or, disappearing leaders, and they just disappear. We never hear from them again. Like these generals that they just got rid of. Do you really want them creating the artificial intelligence that takes over the world? Even Putin admitted this back in 2017. This is the new arms race of the 21st century. Whoever develops AI first is going to rule the world. And that's, talking about bringing artificial intelligence from where it is right now to artificial general intelligence, and then artificial super intelligence. So whoever gets the ASI first is going to rule the world. They're going to have this most powerful system. And, from a biblical standpoint, we know that ultimately, I think that is going to be the European Union, or the revived Roman Empire of some flavor. And somehow they develop it first, and they're going to be they're going to be the ones that create it. And in that, it's going to absolutely take control of every other system in the world, because that's what ASI is going to be able to do. And then finally, just from a cultural sense, we're watching the death of the Western world order. For 4 centuries or more, the Western civilization's moral strength came from its Christian, or the Judeo-Christian worldview. Pairing that up with the Greco-Roman rule of law and some of the philosophical aspects regarding liberty and freedom, and the idea of a republic, all that stuff's going away. We've been importing so many people from countries that don't hold those same values, and there's been no attempt to culture them, to integrate them, to assimilate them into a society, not even just in the US, but in Europe, especially in Canada, that it is... There's no coming back from that. And I think that the only way that we're going to see Europe revived, I don't think there's any hope for the United States at this point, or even Canada, but for Europe, is I think that when the Gog and Magog battle happens, it's going to drain Europe of all those militant, military-aged Muslim males that are currently there protesting and rioting and doing all this crazy stuff. They're going to have this call to arms to come march against Israel in that great battle that they will suffer, not just defeat, but divine defeat, where God supernaturally destroys his armies. And that's going to rid the world of this huge chunk of this militant, angry men. And it's going to leave a vacuum. And in that power vacuum, I think that's where we're going to see Europe being revived into this final iteration of the Roman Empire. But, as I said, every generation believes it's going to endure to the end, or, they're going to endure forever, but they don't. They rise, they fall, and they go the way of every other kind of nation out there. Now, some of what we're seeing here play out is we're seeing it. I think, obviously I'm talking about this, but we're not the only ones that know this. Just like Putin, Xi Jinping, and Trump, I think all sense this great change happening in their spheres of influence. And that's why they're doing the things that they're doing. That's why Russia invaded Ukraine. That's why China is threatening to take over Taiwan, really, chomping at the bit to do this. That's why Trump is basically restructuring our government back. I don't know, you can call it back to its constitutional roots, or restoring power back to the executive branch that had been whittled away for decades and given to this nameless bureaucracy we call the deep state. And so I think the Democrat Party is done. I've said this for a long time now. I think they're dead, gone, they're extinct, they're gone the way of the dodo. I don't see them coming back nationally. Now there is threats in places like San Francisco and New York City and other major kind of remnant hubs of liberalism and progressivism, etc. Those may still dominate with some of their politicians, but only because the corruption is so entrenched there that it's hard to break out of that system. It's hard to get that system cleaned out. But look at what Trump has done. I think this was part of the Project 2025 that he's done just in the 10 months that he's been in office. He's reinstated the Schedule F, which is he can fire his staff, the federal hiring freeze, somewhere around 200,000 federal workers. Not all of them, but a lot of them, DEI based were let go. Any type of these loyalty-based hiring panels were removed. Energy in the environment, we withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement. He approved the Alaska drilling, the mining there at Ambler Road, canceled $8 billion in the green energy projects, rolled back the clean air water rules, which were not even designed to do what they were said they were supposed to do. Socially and culturally, he's banned transgender troops and all these crazy surgeries that they'll come in and they want the taxpayer to pay for their surgery, and basically making these soldiers non-deployable. If you, let's just say that you have a soldier joins the army, is in the army for 2 months or whatever, or 6 months, a year, decides to transition. Now that soldier is going to be non-deployable for years. I mean, basically, you're intentionally damaging a soldier so that they cannot deploy. Cut Planned Parenthood funding, launched FCC probes into the NPR, PBS, ended the federal gender equality policies. Immigration, raised the asylum and USCIS fees, into TPS for key groups, paid self-deportation incentives, and used National Guard, ICE, Border Patrol, etc., for enforcement of removing dangerous illegals from our nation. I think Kristi Noem said something like 18,000 or 28,000 have been removed thus far this year. Economic and safety nets, he fired 6,000 IRS agents, added Medicaid work rules, tightened SNAP work rules, and cut some benefits. Foreign aid, he basically decimated USAID, which is largely a front for the CIA, funding progressive Marxist agendas around the world, and really just a money laundering front for a lot of democratic power groups. Then he's also gone after Antifa, and not just Antifa like the foot soldiers, but gone after the sources of funding, the George Soros types, the Tides Foundation, Open Society Foundation, all of those. You got one guy at the top and he's got all these like umbrella groups under them, and there's hundreds of these groups, and they're just going after the money. They're going after who's pumping all this money, and largely there's about 4 or 5 guys out there that are funding a lot of the leftist activism in the U.S. and so going after those folks. And so that's why you saw the whole No Kings rally protest was a giant dud. It largely fell flat. I think if he hadn't addressed that funding and took action after the funding, it could have been a lot worse. It could have been like the whole summer of love. I think they were going for the whole summer of love repeat from 2020. And then he's allowed for religious displays and prayers at work to come back. And so, I like a lot of what he's doing. And there's a lot of things he's doing that I don't like. And we'll address those tonight as well. But let me bring up this transition here for the third industrial revolution. So if you think back, first industrial revolution, we had it was called the age of mechanization. You had steam engine, hydropower, water power, and then the mechanization of certain things. This is where the whole idea of the Luddites comes in, because you had a group of the Ludds. I can't remember their name in England, but somebody created this new what do you call that when you're making blankets and stuff? Crocheting. Gosh, I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Anyways, they brought in a machine that could do that to replace the women. And I don't know if somebody can help me out with that, but they didn't want that. They fought against that, and they saw the danger of bringing this machine in that would replace so many workers. So they were called the Luddites, and those are quilting, I guess. The loom. Thank you, Carol. That's what it is. And so that's where this idea of the Luddites are anti-technology. But as technology advances, there's always going to be a certain segment of society that's being cut out from work. Their purpose for living is now gone. And I saw that firsthand in Kentucky with being up in Appalachia. Once they closed all those coal mines down, people didn't have anything. There wasn't anything for them to do. There was no industry there, So what do people do? They turn to drugs. They turn to meth. It just get ruined. incentive to even try and to better their lives. People just kind of gave up. But and that's what happens every time these industrial revolutions happen. And there was always a beginning. There's a kind of that transition phase, and then there's really you've kind of totally moved into whatever that phase is. The second industrial revolution was the introduction of electricity. Tell me some good night. And the assembly line. And one of the things that came out of this was the First World War. And the ability to mass produce things very quickly incentivized countries to, especially in Europe, to build up their arms. It created this arms race amongst Germany and Austria-Hungary and the French and the British and the Russians, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was one of the downfalls of mass production. But also a lot of the countries began to move away from the agricultural sectors now into the industrial sections. And, so you have a smaller group of people now producing food for a larger amount of people. I think in the year 1900, the world was at, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 2 billion people, if I'm not mistaken. And now we're at, over 8. And then we went from there till about the 50s and 60s. We got into automation, information and communication technologies. Data processing began to happen more frequently amongst the bigger companies, and then even into the military in the academic sense of universities and research and things. So the third industrial revolution really ran up until about the 1990s, the late 90s, as the internet, I would even say probably the early 2000s, but as touch screen technology, biometric stuff started to come about, that really took off. And so now we were at the end of the third and going into the fourth, and we're kind of right in the middle of all that. It's just it's turning into a grind, and I think it's also causing a lot of industries are going to start collapsing here, because when you can use artificial intelligence at a law firm and it replaces so many law students and things that come in and intern at these law firms, or they're working for low pay, but they're getting that experience working trying to grow up to be a lawyer. They don't need them anymore. So then you're cutting your own ladder off, in a sense, right? But it's more cost effective and efficient for them to use one AI program rather than to hire all these people. And you multiply that across any kind of system or any kind of industry where data has to be input into the system. And usually it's a human. It used to be a human was doing that, and now it's just much easier for a system to do it, right? So I think that's the where we're at now. We're going to start to see, as AI continues to advance and as robotics gets paired up with this artificial systems and they become more autonomous, there's going to be a lot more industries that are going to be shutting down, and it's not going to be good for the workers writ large. And that's why there's always this talk about universal basic income. Elon Musk has talked about, a lot of folks are talking about this, and just paying people to basically exist because their jobs are gone and they're going to have to find some new way to make a living. And, when people, take what happened in Appalachia and then spread that across the world, and you've got a bunch of people who now are basically jobless. They don't have a purpose in life. That's all been replaced by machines or by AI or whatever. You're looking at a world that is ripe for trouble. On top of that, we've also advanced the ability to mass produce things. We don't have the assembly lines necessarily anymore. Now we have things like being able to create things, what do they call it, 3D printing and all that, nanotechnology, where we can just build stuff from the molecular level up, and we can mass produce it, boom, right there as quickly as we need it. And I mean, that's going to revolutionize the logistics chains around the world and how we fight wars and everything. So everything's changing, and it is a time of great turmoil and great angst and anxiety. And it reminds me of the passage in Luke 21, 25, 26, talking about the distress of nations with perplexity, that there's not going to be any seemingly good answer to answer the problems that we're all facing. But let me continue here. Let me shift subjects real quick. What does it mean to be in this time? And if you look back at every other kind of period when we've transitioned from one industrial revolution into the next, it's always resulted in war, conflict, massive turmoil in the world, civil war, civil strife, lawlessness. And so when you add all those factors together, the Industrial Revolution changes, the death of the Western civilization culturally, we're losing our identity, our national sovereignty, that the whole idea of what the Westphalian, 1648 Westphalian idea of sovereign nations, that's going away. The fact that technology is advancing faster than people can keep up with it. Even the people developing can't keep up with how fast things are moving and transitioning. You take all that, as well as the decline of the US-led world order that's provided kind of some stability for the world for the last 70, 80 years. When you add all those factors up together, we're entering this time, I just call it the end game, because it's the end of this present age that we're in, and we're quickly transitioning into what the Bible describes as the coming tribulation, which is the 70th week of Daniel. It's a 7-year period that is marked by, I guess, the rise of regionalism first, and then these 10 kings kind of take control, and then out of the 10 kings, one guy rises up. He's the 11th, and he subdues 3. So now he is the 8th, but now he takes over the whole thing. And the only way that he'd be able to do that is if he had things like artificial superintelligence, he had quantum computing, he had all of these things at his fingertip that he could control everything, because now everything is online. And now he has the levers and the means to control that. And he doesn't even need large armies anymore. He has drones. He's got missile strikes. He's got laser weapons. He's got stuff in space. He's got stuff underground, stuff underwater. I mean, when this guy takes over, it's going to be absolute, and there's not going to be any good way to challenge him. But I think that's what we're in now. And let me just kind of caveat all that to say this. Look, I believe that we're very near to the Lord's return. I believe that we're in this season. I even think within, this window of 4 years, I think we could easily see the rapture happen. And I think my concern is for a lot of people that aren't paying attention, they're just thinking like, oh, we've got another 20, 30 years before the US. I mean, they're still thinking we've got, 100 plus years going on in the future. And if you listen to all these guys that surround themselves around Trump, Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller, all of those folks, their eschatology is not aligned with what Scripture says is going to happen. And they're living in some kind of alternate reality. I mean, they're doing a lot of good things. They're ending a lot of the corruption. They're ending a lot of the grifting and the things that have really made things bad over the last 20 years. They're finally kind of getting a handle on it. But at the same time, because they don't have a solid understanding of biblical eschatology, they're still thinking we've got 100, 200, 300 years. I mean, we still got the world's just going to keep going on and on and on. They don't see how fast things are quickly aligning to what the Bible says they will look like in that final moments before he returns at the rapture. They just don't get it. They don't see it. And so they're thinking still 20, 30 years down the road before anything really bad happens to the United States. And they think they can turn the ship around. We're like the Titanic, and it's already too late. I mean, we don't even have enough wiggle room to avoid the iceberg at this point. We're going to hit it. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We're going to hit it. And the Bible doesn't mention any nation like the United States. The Bible mentions a lot of nations, even nations that at the time were very pro or friendly with Israel, or they, basically were, it's addressing them by their ancient tribal names. But those nations are mentioned, but there's no nation even remotely looking like the United States that can be, shown that plays any kind of role inside the 70th week. Now, the U.S. will still be there. It won't be the U.S. anymore. We'll just be some kind of a nation. We won't have a constitution or be a constitutional republic or anything anymore, but there'll still be cities here, and there'll still be some kind of a government, but it's not going to be like what it was after the chaos of the rapture and the restructuring of the world, probably into some type of regional groups. Like North America would be a group, Mexico, the U.S. and Canada and Greenland would all be kind of one group. And that goes back to the Club of Rome, and even the United States, military, we've had the world divided up into these regions for a very long time. So it just seems like there's, we're in the end of this right now. And it's, so that's why I call tonight the end game. We're at the very end of this age that we're living in now. And one of the things that I think people should be prepared for is that should the Lord tarry, should we be here longer than we anticipate? And like I said, I look at 2033 as playing a role inside the 70th week. It may be the beginning of it. It could be the midpoint. It doesn't necessarily have to be the end. I just think that year is not going to come and go without it connecting into the 70th week in some way, shape, or form. But the point is that things could go very bad very quickly. And we've seen from history that anytime a nation goes against the nation of Israel, it doesn't work out well for them. And it doesn't matter what you think of Israel. It doesn't matter what you think of Netanyahu. It doesn't matter what any of us think, whether we think that Israel is the real Jews or not. God made a covenant with them, and God's going to keep that covenant with them, period. End of story. We don't have any say in this matter. We may not like it. And, so that's one of the things that Trump's doing now that is really, it's got me scared for our nation, is that when he starts to dictate terms to Israel and saying, you can't annex Judea and Samaria. Well, first of all, it's their land already. They already won that land in the 6 Day War. So I don't even think they need to annex it. It's theirs. They just need to exercise control over it and drive it like they own it, like they do own it. So they just need to go ahead and kick out all of the Arabs and the other groups that are there that are causing problems. And I think if there are Arab peoples that are there that want to live peacefully, then let them stay there peacefully. But if they're there and they're causing problems, or they're part of terrorist cells, or they're harboring, or they're sympathetic to these groups, they just need to remove them and send them back to the original Palestine, which was Transjordan. And I don't have a problem with the Palestinian state. It just not inside of the boundaries of Israel. They could have made a Palestinian state 30 years ago in the Oslo Accords if they just went back to the original agreement and made Jordan, which was called Transjordan then, make that the Palestinian state. Boom. That could have been solved, 100 plus years ago. But they keep trying to whittle away at Israel. And the fact that Trump is going along with this is, I just think it's absolutely retarded. And excuse my language, but that is the dumbest thing that he has done so far that I've seen. The fact that he thinks he can work with these countries like Qatar and Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Oman and any of these other countries, and in Saudi Arabia, and think that they're actually honest brokers in this. He cannot be that stupid. I gotta believe that he's not that stupid, but he's really, really trying to cement his legacy in the Middle East. And I think I don't know if it's his hubris or whatever, but it really is. It's really irked me, and I think that the more that he presses this issue, the worse it's going to be for the U.S. So I have a big issue with that. But let me jump. Let me frequency hop on you guys here. I want to talk to a little bit about 3i Atlas as well, and I got some slides here that I got from the actual channel I pulled these from. It's in the show notes or the description. And I want to talk about 3i Atlas because I think a lot of people there's a lot of hype about it. And I want to bring that hype back in a little bit, but I also want to show why this is such a interesting thing to be looking at. So let me do this here. Okay. So here's 10 things about 3i Atlas that are just mind-boggling. So first thing, maybe 11 things, but first thing here is the size. So the first one we had was Oumuamua, which is in the middle here, the 400 meters in size. It was like that cylindrical cigar-shaped asteroid that was kind of tumbling over, head over tail, all the way, and it would tumble 3 times an hour. So once every 7 hours, 7.5 hours, it would tumble. And it kept that same tumble rate even when it sped up, which is what makes it so bizarre. But the next one is 2i Borisov, which was more of a very bright comet, but it was about a kilometer big, right? Well, this one here is about the size of Manhattan. This is 3i Atlas here, the 5.6 kilometers. And it's probably bigger than that, but they're on a conservative side, it's about almost 6 kilometers long. And it has so many weird things going on with it. First, it's the fastest object that we've ever seen in our solar system. So when you think about how fast the Earth goes around the sun about every 30 kilometers. I don't know what that is in miles per hour, but 30 kilometers every second it's traveling around the sun. Mercury goes around the sun 48 kilometers every second. So because Mercury is obviously a lot closer to the sun, its orbits around, it's going to be much quicker. Well, this thing is coming in at 58 kilometers per second. And I mean, it is crazy fast. And I don't know if you think about how far it was. Let me see. Let me translate that into miles per hour for us Americans. It is. So it's traveling about 36 miles every second. 36 miles a second. Think about that. And so it's coming in so fast that we know that it's not from our solar system because it's traveling at this hyperbolic speed, which means it's not trapped by our sun. Our sun is a star, and everything in our solar system is trapped in its orbit, right? So this thing is coming in so fast, it's at a hyperbolic speed. It's not trapped by our orbit. It's going to go and continue on out. Same with Borisov and Oumuamua. They were all fast, but this one is by far the fastest. It came in what they call a unbound orbit, and then it's came from deep space somewhere, they believe from the galactic center, the galactic being the Milky Way, in the realm of Sagittarius, came from that direction, the same direction that the WOW signal came from back in the late 70s, I believe, which is probably the clearest proof that there's something out there, right? That from science standpoint, they something made this noise back in the 70s or maybe the early 80s, and the guy that just wrote it he wrote wow because he was kind of blown away by it. But it's coming from that same direction. It's coming in at a T-bone impact to the ecliptic plane. So let me get to that slide real quick. So when you think about, let's see if this, yeah. So Oumuamua, 1i Oumuamua came in, and it basically, if you think about our solar system is kind of like a frisbee, right? If you think about a flat frisbee, And we're just, space is three-dimensional. It's every direction, and it's just vast, right? So massive. And it just came in, basically, and shot back out once it went through perihelion and shot around the sun, shot it back out. And that's about the direction it came in. Well, 2I Borisov came in kind of the same way. And if you think about it, just coming in from the north, right, coming in from above us down through, and it just kind of transitioned through. Again, it's not trapped by our sun. Well, 3I Atlas is coming in flat. It's coming in, here's that Frisbee, it's coming in flat on it, like just skimming the surface, like when you throw a rock on the surface and it's skipping. It's just right off it, 3 degrees off the ecliptic plane. And that is what makes it fascinating. And the odds of that happening, that it would pass by Jupiter, do like close flybys of Jupiter, Mars, and then go through perihelion around the sun. So the only planet that could observe it, which is Earth, is at its most disadvantaged when we should have had the best chance to see it. Now we're on the other side of the sun, and there's no way we can see it. So the timing of that is suspect as well. And then the polarization. So this is a picture of positive polarization, and that's as light from the sun hits an object, it's positive when that light reflects off of it, right? Well, 3I Atlas is the most negative polarized object we've ever seen. So light is hitting it from the sun, but it's going right back to the sun. So they caught that, and this is a very simplified explanation of this. But it is the most negatively polarized object that we have ever seen. So that is very, very unique. The fact that it has this odd mixture, almost inverse mixture of carbon to water. In water in space, obviously, is just ice. There's no liquid in space because of how cold it is. But in most comets you see is the inverse of that. It's mostly H2O, water, and rock. And instead, this is mostly carbon and very little water. But it's also doing things like, as it's coming in to, you see how far out it is away from the sun. We don't normally see comets because, well, first of all, if you have a comet, you have like a rock, right? And then around it develops a coma, which is all the ice and the dust and the smaller particles that kind of form around it that make it look like it's kind of got a halo effect to it. And then as the sun hits that object, the sun is constantly shooting out these solar rays or solar waves. And as those waves hit these comets, it causes that the waves kind of like a solar wind, I think that's what it's called, is causing all that debris to travel behind the comet. That's what gives it a tail. Well, this thing, first of all, we could see it way out past Jupiter. So it should not even been exhibiting what they call sublimation at that point. Sublimation is when that ice is heated up and it goes straight from a solid to a gas, right? It doesn't go through a liquid phase. It goes straight from solid to gas. That's called sublimation. And usually the closer that object gets to like our sun, it heats up and it causes that to happen. It makes the tail go really long because of the solar winds, and then the heat from the sun is causing it to heat up. Well, this thing was sublimating way out there past Jupiter in changing colors. And then it had this anti-tail, which the tail was coming in front of it. So it was doing everything backwards, it seems like, And then as it got closer, it just exited this ton of water that came out of it in the form of this tail at the same time. But that wasn't until, so it was doing the sublimation, but it was just doing it at the wrong times, not the way a normal comet would do. Another thing is like with the, let me get my notes here real quick because I always mess this up. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, so for the metal, the composites of this, you had nickel and iron is what's most common in most objects that we see in space, whether comets or asteroids or things like that. And the way it is that when the reason the nickel and iron always go together is because they are formed from the remnants of inside of a star, that like a dying star. And when that star goes supernova and explodes, the nickel and the iron are formed inside of it. They go out together. But this object had a lot of nickel but no iron. And so something would have had to separate those two things, which like Avi Loeb, that Harvard professor, would say seems to be, we only see that inside of a artificial something that's been manufactured. So it would produce, it would strain out the iron and only keep the nickel. But so the composite of this comet itself is very bizarre. And that's why a lot of people want to think there's some type of artificiality to it. And so I'm not saying that it is or that it isn't. I'm just saying that it has a lot of weird things going on with it. Now, with regard to the solar winds, that's another picture there of the coma around the rock itself, around the asteroid, and then the coma forms around it, and then the solar winds blow the material out behind it. That's what causes the tail. And you think back to the Hale-Bopp comet, that had a massive tail, right? And that was that was bound inside of our solar system. That wasn't even an interstellar object. And so this thing had the tail going the wrong way, facing the sun for the longest time. And it wasn't until it came in past Jupiter that that anti-tail went away and it formed a real tail behind it. But again, the materials inside of it, the fact that it's more carbon than it is water, and the nickel with no iron coming in at the ecliptic plane, coming in, it's the fastest object we've ever had come into the solar system. I mean, there's so many weird things happening with that. I think it's just fascinating. And it's supposed to really within, I think it hits the peak of perihelion on Halloween, somewhere right around Halloween. And the fact that we have satellites that go around Mars, the fact that they released a couple of photos from the rover, and some of these other machines on the surface of Mars have released some photos, but they're kind of like time release photo, or we're taking a picture of something that's moving, but that's that long exposure to it, and it stretches out whatever you're taking that photo of. That made it look cylindrical, but it's not, because of that time-elapse capture on that. And I'm not an astronomer, so a lot of these terms I'm still wrestling with myself. But the fact that we have satellites that have like amazing, that could give us very, very clear photos of it, just so happened that the government shut down and somehow NASA can't release these photos, even though we know they took them. They're not releasing it for a reason, and I don't know what that reason is. Whether there's something very troubling about this, or whatever. But they've chosen not to release this. And then the European Space Agency have released some photos, and their photos are. I showed this on my presentation in Oklahoma, but there's a series of these photos, and this thing, like the rock inside of it, it looks like it's changing shapes. There's there's like 5 or 6 different screenshots of the images that we're pulling off of this thing from the ESA, and it looks like it's morphing or changing. It's the weirdest thing in the world. So, anyways, that's what I'm thinking about with 3I Atlas. It seems very bizarre to me. I don't understand what role it plays in here, other than to say that I think that if I were Satan, and if I'm playing devil's advocate here, but if I'm the devil, right, and I know the rapture could happen any moment, I'm going to be throwing all kinds of stuff towards the earth, so that if and when the rapture does happen, he has a ready-made excuse. And I'm sure other folks, L.A. Marzulli and others, have talked about this, but I've kind of long held to this idea that Satan, in order for the rapture, for the people to buy into this global delusion or great delusion that they're going to be succumbing to, there has to be a global crisis. A global crisis requires a global distraction. And so I posited the idea that we don't, I mean, I don't know if this is a spaceship or not. And obviously it's not going to be little gray men or reptilians or whatever. There are some guys out there, some videos that I even posted on Facebook. These guys they're hired by the CIA and these other agencies to remote view things. And I'm not poo-pooing remote viewing, because some of these guys they're tapping into other powers, and they're able to see things they shouldn't be able to see, or know things that they shouldn't be able to know. And one example, or really a lot of these different examples, are like, a guy that's a remote viewer that's hired by some CIA or some other group like NSA. They bring them into a room, remote location. They don't have anything on them. All they do is give them a piece of paper, a pencil, and a 10-digit grid coordinate. That's all they have. They have nothing else to go off of, and they begin to tap into the demonic realm, and they're shown what is there, and they're able to draw these things out, and it pairs up perfectly with what and they'll pull up random grids of random things around the world to see if people have this ability. Well, these most well-renowned remote viewers that are on contract with the government, they're saying that the ship is full of reptilians or whatever. So they're fully convinced that there's something on board of this 3i Atlas. So I don't know, maybe there's something to the idea that, Satan's going to have some kind of ready-made excuse, and that as we go up, they come, as LA talks about, as we go up, they come down. The only thing we don't know is if they come down in a kind of a friendly manner. Hey, we're your ancient alien creators. We seeded your planet 30 million years ago, blah, blah, blah. And all the stuff they talk about on Ancient Aliens. Or they come in like Independence Day, and they come in kind of a hostile manner. And either way, it's going to cause humanity to unite. And I think Satan really needs humanity to unite, to come under one banner in order for him to bring his man in, the Antichrist, to come in and take over everything. So I definitely think that that's a possibility. And so the last one I had here, I wanted to talk about the ballroom that Trump is looking to put on here he demolished the East Wing, which was, so the center here is, obviously the main White House where the family, everybody lives and works and functions there in the main section. Then you have the West Wing, which is where the president operates, and his staff, and the Oval Office, etc. And then the East Wing was largely the First Lady's wing with her staff and whatnot. And so a lot of people, and I'm not hung up over the fact that he's demolished part of the White House. I mean, every president leaves a mark on the White House to some degree or another, some bigger than others. But they've long complained about and it seems insane to me that they don't have a ballroom. You think about all the dignitaries that they host around the world that come into the United States, and the events they do, they don't have anything there. That seems, it always struck me as odd that they have to go off site to go to have some kind of event. But it's supposed to hold, it's like 90,000 square feet. It's supposed to be able to hold 999 people. It's going to have bulletproof windows. It's probably going to have all the bells and whistles. I mean, there could be other reasons why they're tearing this down. There might be too many bugs. There might be, but like electronic bugs. It might be plagued with all sorts of stuff we just don't know about. But this is all being funded privately and whatnot. But I know everybody's throwing a big fit about this. This doesn't really necessarily bother me. I think again, these guys aren't thinking short term. They're not thinking, hey, we got to worry about the survival of our Western civilization, and not just Western civilization, but our nation. And they're thinking long term. We're going to be here through 2028 through 2036. They're looking at Trump running again in 2028, which he'll be like 82 at that point. I don't know if he's going to have the stamina to do that. Which brings in the idea of the last Trump again. How long is this last Trump going to last? This last Trump presidency? I have no idea. And Steve Bannon's all about, Trump's going to run and win again in 2028. I don't know. But either way, it should be like J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio or some variation, some grouping of his staffing with move up to that stage. But they're thinking like, hey, we're going to be running things here until at least 2036, 2040. So they're planning for the long term. They're playing. They're not doing this kids glove stuff anymore. They are playing to win. And the Republicans love to lose. I don't know why. Going back to like Bob Dole and John McCain, and then we had we had George H.W. Bush, and then we had John McCain, and we had who's the Mormon guy, blanking on his name. Anyways, hey, we gave it our best shot, and we'll get them next time, that kind of thing. No, Trump's not playing that because he saw how much damage that they can do when they're in office. Romney, thank you. Mitt Romney. So that's why I say the Democrats, once they remove all the election rigging, the mail-in voting, they're already doing it with the redistricting, and the redistricting is long overdue, especially when you think about a lot of the seats that the Democrats have held. They shouldn't even have those seats to begin with. They're counting illegal aliens. They're counting all these people that aren't even citizens. And it's allowing the Democrats to edge that margin up closer and making it so that the Republicans can either never win the House, or if they win, they'll only have a small majority. So, I think a lot of this stuff is correcting all these wrongs over the years, but we're just out of time. We've run out of time. Okay, let me see what else I've got. Guys, I apologize. I've been ignoring the chat. My apologies. Let me go back here. Thank you, Kelly. Much appreciate you. And guys, another thing. I'm going to be shutting down my P.O. box. So if in the past you've sent things to that P.O. box, I'm going to be changing addresses to that. So more to follow on that, but don't mail anything in because I won't be able to access it. Okay. Thank you for bringing up Melissa. Hurricane Melissa was a tropical storm like yesterday or the day before, and then somehow overnight it morphed into this Category 5. And I mean, the winds on it are just insane. 241 mile per hour gusts from Melissa. Yeah, and sustained winds of like over 175, 180 miles per hour sustained. And it's moving at like 3 miles per hour. It is going to absolutely destroy Jamaica. So if you live in Jamaica, please get to somewhere safe. I don't know if anybody's in the channel or the group in the tribe that's from Jamaica, but please warn those people to get out of harm's way. Not just them, but Cuba, and then probably the Bahamas, or not the Bahamas, but the Turks and Caicos, all those islands right there. And then I think it'll exit out through the Bahamas. But I think, this is one of those instances where if Trump continues to monkey with Israel and continues to get them to keep fighting with one hand tied behind their back, there's no saying that hurricane couldn't turn left and go straight into Florida. I mean, all the models are showing it going out into the Atlantic, turning into a fish storm. But we know God, the finger of God, can touch that thing and it can change directions. So it irks me that Trump is ignoring the advice of hopefully Mike Huckabee and others Robert Jeffries have been able to speak to him about trying to dictate terms to Israel in terms of dividing up their land or telling them what they can or can't do. And then there was an earthquake right there in the Caribbean as well, 6.8 that just hit. I mean, just hit like within a couple hours ago. I don't know what the damage is from that or who's impacted by that, but when we begin to monkey with Israel, bad things are going to start happening to our country. Yep. Thank you. The Alaska got hit with that typhoon, and there's massive flooding up in Alaska. Massive flooding. And it's not just that. I mean, go back, if you get Bill Koenig's book, Eye to Eye, I mean, he chronicles all this stuff. Every time the U.S. begins monkeying with Israel, bad things happen to us. And it's not like it's a, that they're like this lucky rabbit's foot or anything like that. No, they're just, God calls them the apple of his eye. Jerusalem is the apple of his eye. That's his land that he covenanted with those people. Think what you want about them. That's irrelevant to any of this, because God is not a liar. God is not a man that he could lie and go back and renege on his word. He is going to keep his word to them, which is why there has to be a 70th week, because 69 weeks have been completed and they're ended at the death of Christ on the cross there. That ended the 69th week. There's still 1 week remaining, 1 week of years. And that hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened historically. There's nothing in the past that we can even tie it to. And we know this is still yet a future time that's going to happen. Because think about it, the temple was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. We know that Caesar Nero wasn't the Antichrist because he committed suicide. The Bible says that the Antichrist is going to be killed by Christ himself. Not even killed, he's going to be destroyed. And by that, he's going to be thrown alive into the lake of fire along with the false prophet. So they're thrown alive into the lake of fire, not resurrected and then thrown alive into the lake of fire. Not only that, but the book of Revelation wasn't even written until 95 AD. And that was toward the end of the reign of Domitian, Emperor Domitian, and lots of evidence for that. I've talked about this in the past, but it's still talking about a future time. And so when you read Daniel 9:24, the angel Gabriel tells Daniel that there are 6 things determined to happen for the nation of Israel. And one of them is to do away with sin, to wrap up sin. And we still have sin in the world. So, I mean, obviously this has not been concluded yet. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole just yet. But that 70th week is still going to happen. And that's why we're confident that Israel still has some major role to play in this. Even if we go back to the rebirth of the nation in 1948, that rebirth didn't happen in a vacuum. The rebirth of Israel was step 20 in a long series of things that were unfolding. You could go back to Mark Twain's visit to one of the most popular Americans of all time, well-known Americans, visited the land when it was called Palestine at the time, which was named after by Emperor Hadrian in like around 135 AD. He named that Palestina after, it's the Latinized name for the Philistines, which was the Israel's ancient enemies. He did that as a slight to them, to the Jewish people and to the nation. He just wanted them to be erased from history. So he renamed everything, salted the ground so nothing could grow. And basically for the next 19 centuries, there wasn't anything there. And so Mark Twain goes and visits in the 1860s or maybe the early 1870s. And it's like, dude, we didn't even run into one person the whole time we're there. And he said, there's just nothing but cactus and tumbleweeds, But then in 1897, Theodore Herzl in Europe is a European Jew, and he's brings out the because he saw the tides of the zeitgeist of the time was becoming increasingly anti-Semitic and anti-Jew and very hostile to Jews. And he thought that Jews, it was time for them to regather and go back to their homeland, their ancient homeland. And so there, 1897, we had from there, we're in the middle of the Second Industrial Revolution, and then that goes into the start of World War I. The Ottoman Turks sided with the Axis powers. Or no, is it the Central Powers or the Axis powers? Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Turks formed, I guess, the Central Powers, and they lost that war. And then the Brits divided up between the Brits and the French. They divided up the Middle East, And then there was a series of, 1920 is when 1921, the San Remo Conference is when they basically created a Jewish state. And then the Arab state, the Palestinian state, was going to be, it was the nation of Jordan, called Transjordan at the time. And whoever took over that kingdom for Jordan was one of the Arabian princes or somebody. He basically said, nope, this is our own country. Take from the Jews and create another state for the other Arabs that are there. And so for the next 20 years, you had Jews and Arabs living in this place called Palestine, and you had Palestinian Jews and you had Palestinian Arabs. There was no such thing as an ethnic Palestinian. There's no right now. There's no such thing as an ethnic Texan. I mean, you're whatever ethnicity you are. You could have come here from. You could have traveled from Ireland or Poland or England or Spain or wherever in the 1800s and lived in Texas for 100 plus years, and you're still not ethnically a Texan. You're whatever ethnicity you are. You're living in Texas. You might be called a Texan, but you're not. There's no such thing as an ethnicity because there's nothing that defines the Texan as a separate ethnic group. If that makes sense. So, anyways, that there was all these things that happened that eventually led to the Jews reclaiming their land, in not only reclaiming their land, but the United Nations validating their land. I think it was Resolution 181, and then that was in November of 1947. Well, by May of 1948, May 14th is when they declared their own statehood. So by the time that happened, there was all these other steps that had taken place that nobody was really paying attention to because you had other things going on like World War I, the Great Depression, World War II. So, I mean, you had these other massive events and these other things are kind of moving along unseen like this undercurrent. And it allowed for the fulfillment of Bible prophecy for Israel to become a nation again. And if you look simply at, even if you don't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, if you look in Matthew 24 in the Olivet Discourse, just work your way backwards from the Olivet or from the abomination of desolation. So Matthew 24:15, Jesus is, going through all these signs that were going to mark the end of the age. And he starts that whole discussion off in the Olivet Discourse. It's called the Olivet Discourse because it was given to his disciples, the 4 disciples, on the Mount of Olives. But he starts that whole conversation off with telling them that the temple is going to be destroyed and they're going to be scattered. And, even when you go into Luke's account, it talks about the destruction in 70 AD, but they're going to be scattered and destroyed. But then somewhere down the road, way down the road, there was going to be an abomination that causes desolation. The only way you could have that is if you have the Holy of Holies inside of a temple standing. That's the only way that could be fulfilled. And Jesus even points back to the prophet Daniel and says, go look to Daniel to get this understanding. And so that means that there has to be a third temple standing. But he started off the whole conversation saying that it was going to be destroyed at the beginning. And it was. It's been destroyed since 70 AD. There hasn't been a temple standing. So there's no way for that abomination of desolations to occur. And it wasn't the temple being destroyed that caused the abomination that causes desolation. He points back to Daniel again. And the only one that came close in kind of like this foreshadowing was the Antiochus Epiphanes, this Greek leader who went inside of the temple, the Jewish temple, the second temple that was standing there. He went inside of the Holy of Holies and he slaughtered a pig on the altar, and then he erected a statue of Zeus inside there, defiling the whole Holy of Holies, right? You couldn't even be, you got to think about how sacred of space this was to them. You had to be the right priest that was assigned to this, and that was it. You had to be from the right tribe, the right training. And even then you went in with a rope around your waist in case God struck you dead in there, and they had to pull your body out by the rope. And now you have these Gentiles going in there completely defiling it. That is the abomination that causes desolation, not the destruction of the temple. In fact, the General Titus didn't even want to destroy the temple. He wanted to preserve it and convert it into some kind of a pagan shrine or whatever. But the zealousness of the legions that were there got caught up with the fervor of killing Jews, and before you know it, there was a fire. Man, it spread everywhere, caused all the gold to melt, and the gold ran between the stones. And I mean, that temple had gold all over it. So the gold melts, goes in between the stones. They have to take the stones part piece by piece. And anyways, that's why that could not have been fulfilled anytime from Christ saying that until it's going to be built again. So we know that it's going to be built again, and we know where it's going to be built again. It's just a matter that we haven't seen it happen, but we're seeing the steps, we're seeing the processes for this coming about, because the people are just now getting to the point where they are ready. I think they're at the threshold of being ready to demand that a third temple be rebuilt. And that idea of this peace, everybody calls it a peace treaty in Daniel 9:27. It doesn't say it's a peace treaty. I think Mondo Gonzalez, you can go to Prophecy Watchers and look at some of his discussions on that. I think he makes some good points that this has tied into the Mosaic covenant, because I think, if I'm remembering correctly, he said that there were 6 other times that the covenant is mentioned in the book of Daniel. It's always referencing the Mosaic covenant, not any other kind of covenant. So we always associate it with the peace treaty because of what we read in 1 Thessalonians 5, that when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction will come upon them like labor pains upon a woman. And so we just kind of associated those two things together. But there's nothing in Daniel 9:27 that says it's a peace treaty. He reaffirms or recommits to a covenant. And it could be that he is allowing the Jews to rebuild their temple again. And it could be some facet of that. So, okay. There was a question. Why did I bring up the east wing of the temple, the east wing of the White House being converted into a ballroom? I think I'd seen that on, somebody had posted on TikTok. There's some lady on TikTok that was talking about this, about how it resembles it's going to resemble the temple in some form or fashion. I didn't watch the whole video, so I didn't know what the point she was driving to is, but there is a reason why he's building this temple, or this temple. The reason he's building this ballroom there inside of the east wing, or what's going to become the new east wing of the White House. The reason I'm bringing attention to that is, one, it's not going to be the newly rebuilt temple. It has nothing to do with the Jews or with Israel or anything. It's purely him wanting to leave his mark on the White House, in the same way that Herod wanted to leave his mark on the temple by expanding it and making it vastly larger and more luxurious than what it had been prior to his reign, King Herod. But we saw what happened with that temple was torn apart stone by stone. And I think Trump and people around him in his circles are thinking that they've got decades to go, and they don't. They don't have all this time that they think they have. They don't have this time left. So I don't know. I think the destruction of that is coming in some way, shape, or form. I don't know how, but I assume that when the rapture does happen, DC is going to go up in flames. It's going to be a cause of chaos, riots, lawlessness, perhaps, multifaceted attack by other nations that have been waiting for us to get into a weakened state, so that, like Russia or whoever. So I just find it fascinating that this is going on right now, that this is a priority right now when there's so many other things that we're at these existential, got like 20 different existential threats to the United States. And I know that the way that Trump operates is he's always operating from a position of optimism, like we just got to motivate people and we got to give them, pump up their belief systems, or they're motivate them that the best days are just ahead of us, not behind us. And I think that that's a large thing that's blinding the conservative right. And that again goes back to faulty eschatology, that either they believe in some kind of a post-millennial idea that the church is going to rebound and we're going to make the world better and then Christ will return. And I think that is not what the Bible teaches at all. And So I think that's just one of those kind of glaring examples of where priorities are right now. And I know Trump's doing a lot of good things, and he's doing a lot of different things, and he's able to multitask and delegate all this stuff out to people, but eventually it's going to catch up to us. Okay. Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that very much. Let's see. All right. Let me go to the questions here. Let's see here. Oh, I was going to stream this on X, but I think I have to have a premium membership to stream on X, and I just haven't gotten there yet. So I'm lucky to be streaming. I think I'm streaming on Facebook as well right now. Let me go to the questions here. Okay, Coco says it's on Facebook. Good. All right, let's go to the first question. This is from Straight Up. Question: if a person dies unsaved, do we assume they would not have ever been saved had they continued to live, since the Lord loses none who are his? If a person dies unsaved, do we assume that they would have never been saved? That's a very good question. And I think the gist of it is that if we believe that God is omnipotent, that he knows everything, and that, like in Isaiah 46:9-10, that he declares the end from the beginning, and everything that he says is going to happen exactly how he says it's going to happen. I think that he knows who is going to be saved and who is not going to be saved. So that definitely could factor into his mercy. That, for example, if he knows they're never going to be saved, and we know that we are going to be judged for our sins, the unsaved are going to be judged for their sins at the great white throne judgment, he could be doing them a mercy by shortening their lives so they have less to be accountable for. And I'm talking about adults, not children or anything like that. You guys know my position on the age of accountability. I think it's a lot older than most people give God credit for, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But it could be for that purpose too. He could be, minimizing the amount of judgment they're going to suffer. Now, they're all going to end up in the lake of fire. We know that death and hell is all going to be thrown there, but whatever the degrees are in suffering could be less for them if they were taken out earlier. But at the same time, it's still up to man's free will to make that decision. And I love reading this. This is from H.A. Ironside, The Door. It said, it's been pictured this way. Here is a vast host of people hurrying down the broad road, with their minds fixed upon their sins, and one stands calling attention to yonder door, the entrance into the narrow way that leads to life eternal. On it, it's plainly depicted the text, "Whosoever will, let him come." Every man is invited. No one need hesitate. Some may say, well, I may not be of the elect, and so it'd be useless for me to endeavor to come, for the door will not open to me. But God's invitation is absolutely sincere. It is addressed to every man. Whosoever will, let him take of the water of life freely. That's from Revelation 22:17. If men refuse to come, if they pursue their own godless ways down to the pit, whom can they blame but themselves for their eternal judgment? The messenger addressed himself to all. The call came to all. The door could be entered by all, but many refused to come and perished in their sins, and such men can never blame God for their eternal destruction. The door was opened, the invitation was given, they refused, and he says to them sorrowfully, "You will not come unto me that you might have eternal life." But some will say, "I am going inside, and I will accept the invitation. I will enter that door." And as he presses his way in and shuts it behind him, as he turns about, he finds it written on the inside of the door the words, quote, "Chosen in Christ before the foundation of the world." And that's from H.A. Ironside's book, In the Heavenlies, page 27, 28. God already knows, but the invitation goes out to everybody. And on that day and the great white throne judgment, when people stand before God, they're going to be without excuse. There won't be one single excuse that they can throw at God and say, but. It's not going to work, because they're going to have every opportunity given to them. So I think that there's probably some truth in that, in the sense that, one, we don't know the day. We don't know how many days we have to live, or how many hours we have left to live, or when our heart will stop beating, or when we'll take our last breath. But God knows, right? And so that's why he tells us today is the day of salvation. Now, right now, if you are not 100% sure that you are born again, you need to just believe in the finished work of Christ. And when Christ died on the cross, that his death on the cross was sufficient to pay for your sins and to pay for my sins. Because none of us are worthy to go in and live with God forever. We're all, God is completely holy and completely perfect. He is the very epitome of righteousness and holiness. We can't exist in his presence the way we are. We need somebody to be a intermediary for us, somebody to give us access to him. And the only way that we can get access to the Father is through the Son, Jesus Christ. That's why Christ came. That's why he left the glories of heaven, took on the form of a human, was born in a manger, of all places, no fanfare, no parades. He lived a perfect, sinless life. And then he was unjustly arrested, beaten, tortured, flogged. He had his beard pulled out, had a crown of thorns mashed down on his head, was whipped, was mocked, spit on, slapped, beaten, and then made to carry his own cross all the way from where the Pharisees had been trying him there at that monkey trial at the Sanhedrin. And he had to carry his cross all the way to Calvary, Mount Calvary, and then they crucified him on it. And the whole time they're sitting there laughing and mocking him, right? He endured all of that, it talks about in Hebrews, and he said that was the joy set before him. He didn't want to do it, but he knew that by doing it, the greatest amount of good would come to the greatest amount of people. And that would be that by his death, and we trust in him, we trust in his work there on the cross, not our own righteousness, because I can't be good enough to earn my way to heaven. I can't give enough money. I can't go to church enough. I can't do enough missionary work. I can't, it doesn't, all those things are good, but they don't get you into heaven, right? The only way to get into heaven is by the shed blood of Christ. So now when God the Father looks at me, I'm a sinner. I screw up all the time. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. If I'm pointing my finger at anybody, I've got four fingers pointing back at me, or whatever, three pointing back at myself. It's the fact that when God the Father looks at me, he doesn't see me just as me anymore, as this sinful human that's at odds, that's at war with his his righteousness, his holiness, because I'm living in rebellion if I'm not covered by the blood of his Son. But when he looks at me now, he sees me covered in the blood of his Son, and now I'm made acceptable. And that goes all the way back through the Old Testament, through the sacrificial systems, it takes the shedding of innocent blood for the remission of sins. In Christ, when he died, that did away for the sacrifice program forever, because he only had to die once, and that is sufficient enough. So when I trust in that and I ask God to save me, to forgive me of my sins, and I call on him to be saved, it doesn't say you might be saved. It says you shall be saved. You will be saved. As long as you believe that, and that's what you're not just saying it to say it, you're believing it in your heart and confessing it with your mouth. That is what it means to be saved. When that happens, it transforms you from the inside out. God begins this work in you, and he begins to change you. And now when you do righteousness or you do good things, it's not to gain salvation, it's because you are saved. And so there's different stages of salvation. There's the justification stage, and that's only happens one time, and that's when you place your faith on the finished work of Christ on the cross. You can't undo it, and you can't redo it. It's once you do it once, it's done. You're sealed by the Holy Spirit at that moment. And it talks about that in Ephesians chapter 1, 11 through 14. as well as chapter 4, verse 30, and 2 Corinthians 1, 21 and 22. You're sealed. You're now bought and paid for by God. He owns you, right? And he puts his Holy Spirit inside of you to seal you until the day of redemption. That is justification. That then opens the next stage to sanctification. So if I got saved at the age of 6 and I lived to the age of 96, I will be going through my entire life through this process of sanctification, where I'm in the process of being saved, where now the Holy Spirit is beginning to transform me from the inside out. And I am in the process of becoming more Christ-like. And that's the intended goal, is for us to become more Christ-like throughout our life. It talks about that in Ephesians chapter 4, 11 through 16. And that's the ultimate, the end state for us, is to be like Christ. And that is the process of sanctification. It's a lifelong event, right? And then at the end of that, whether you die or at the rapture, it's going to come the glorification. And that, again, is a one-time event. You can't undo it and you can't redo it. And that's where God is going to transform us, as it talks about in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 1 Corinthians 15, from our mortality to immortality, and from corruptible to incorruptible. And I don't know how to describe it. I mean, John even wrestled with this in 1 John 3. He says, I don't understand it, perfectly, but we'll be like Christ was after his resurrection. And we'll be us. We'll still be us, but we'll be like the perfect versions of us, the way God intended us to be from the very beginning, and probably perhaps even better. And we'll be immortal. We'll never die at that point. We'll never get sick. We'll never get gray hair. We'll never get love handles or cancer or dementia or any of those things. Forever we'll be in this perfect state of being. And we'll be able to manipulate physical matter, like sit down in a chair, but then we can walk through a wall. Or if I think about it, I want to go sit on the rings of Saturn. I can just think about being there, and I can be there. And I could be in space, and I'm not impacted by the cold of space. Or I can go to the bottom of the ocean, and I don't have to breathe air, because I don't need to breathe air. I'm perfectly fine in whatever situation I'm in. I could go stand in the middle of the sun, and I'm not going to be hurt by it. We're impervious to anything that could hurt or harm us. And at the same time, we could still eat and drink. Jesus ate like 6 times after his resurrection. He didn't need to eat, but he wanted to eat. And so we'll be able to eat, and we'll spend eternity building and creating and exploring. And after 1 trillion years, we still will not have come to the end of God. We'll still be amazed by what he's doing. And then 1 trillion more years and 1 trillion more years. It will never end. That's what God has in store for us. And that's why we look forward to the rapture. It's not simply that we want to escape this life in this world. It's that what's awaiting us is so far much better than anything this world could offer us. It just pales in comparison to anything that this world can give us. And so I know a lot of people, when we talk about the pre-trib rapture, they think, oh, you guys just want to escape. The rapture is not just for American Christians. I don't know where that concept came from. It is for all believers. And I guarantee you, there are Christians all over the Middle East, the Far East, and Latin America, in Africa, that are being persecuted mercilessly right now, who are desperately in need of a rescue. They're going to get raptured too. It's not just American Christians. I don't know why people think that. It's all Christians. Even Christians that don't believe in the rapture are going to be raptured. I mean, they're going to be very surprised, but they're going to be raptured nonetheless. All right. I went way off on a rabbit trail there. Sorry about that. All right. Okay. Annie Elizabeth, do you think we'll see the start of Gog and Magog? I don't think we will. I think that we'll see the buildup to it, but I think the rapture is the crisis that kicks off everything for Gog and Magog to happen. Because right now, the U.S. is still in a position to come to Israel's aid. Even during the worst presidency we ever had, the Biden years, even he was still supporting Israel to a large degree, and people were holding back because the United States still had these traditional alliances with Israel. So if it happened under the Biden administration, I think it definitely is going to be the case under Trump, this administration. And if it continues on beyond 2028, it still will be the case. So no, I don't think that we will see it, but I think that the rapture will be the cause du jour for the enemies of the West and the enemies of Israel to finally grow the cojones to actually launch a war against Israel, this massive invasion. Now, here's where I think things get interesting. And I know a lot of, I guess other people have talked about this too, but when you read through the Old Testament, the Jews, I think they probably think this is the last great battle. So when you read through the chronology in Ezekiel, starting in 36, 37, you've got the regathering of the nation of Israel into the valley of dry bones. That becomes a mighty army, but they don't have the breath of life in them just yet, but they're still standing on their feet. And then you have Gog and Magog, 38, 39, and God supernaturally delivers Israel from this army that comes from all over the world marching against them. And I think they tie in Zechariah 12, Zechariah 14 into that, thinking that that's kind of the same battle, just from looking at it from different angles. But then they think they're done, because then Ezekiel 40 through 48, or the rest of the book of Ezekiel, is dealing with the new temple. And so it seems like they think they're done, because they don't have the New Testament. They don't have the book of Revelation. They don't know that there's, the 21 judgments that are going to come. They don't see the Battle of Armageddon or any of that stuff. They think that Gog and Magog is their Armageddon. So I think they're deceived into believing that they are entering this time when they're going to restore the temple. And then at that point, the Messiah will come. And again, for the Jews, the Messiah isn't God incarnate like Jesus is. He's just their version of the Messiah is just a man. And so, I mean, even Jewish channels that I watch now, they are still waiting for their Messiah. They think they're in this time is the messianic times, that their Messiah is going to come. But again, it's just a man. It's not God incarnate, because they only see God just as, one, as the Father. That's it, So that's another rabbit trail there. But yeah, so I don't think we'll see Gog Magog. I mean, I would be very surprised if we see Gog and Magog. I just don't. For me, the rapture is what kind of kicks everything off for that to take place. Patrick Hart, I am persuaded when the Bible speaks of dragons, it refers to dinosaurs. Why do you suppose Satan is called the great red dragon? His appearance or characteristics, Nakash, reptilian. Okay, and if I have some answers in Genesis, folks, don't blast me for this, because here's my thoughts on this, kind of paired up with what we know from history. So the word dinosaur, obviously is a new word that was created toward the end of the 19th century, 1880s, 1890s, somewhere in there. Somebody came up with that term. So, but if you go to every culture around the world, going back to, ancient, prehistory, they talked about dragons. Now, am I saying that dragons is really just the code word for what we know of as dinosaurs? I think that they probably were all in some kind of same class of whatever you think about animal types or whatever, that a dragon was part of this system, and they were probably the last portion of this to die out, because there was dragons recorded up into the Middle Ages. And so they permeated every culture, even cultures that are not Christian. So I do think dragons existed, and I don't think they were dinosaurs, but I think they fall in the same genus or the same family of beings, that these giant reptiles that we know of, that we now call dinosaurs, that dragons would have fell into that, probably the alpha predator of all of those classes there. Just like we have alpha predators inside of and I get all the genus, species, family, etc. I get all those kind of things mixed up. But whatever the main family is, you've got everything from a kitty cat, a little house cat, all the way up to like a Bengal tiger, or to an African lion. So, So there's all manner of cats in between, from house cats to Maine Coons to servals, what are they called, servals, to mountain lions to cheetahs, jaguar. I mean, you got all kinds of stuff in there. So I think that what we think of as dragons and what historically we identify as dragons were probably the alpha predators of what we call dinosaurs and that whole family line of dinosaurs. So I think that the imagery there is apropos, that these must have been ferocious animals. I don't know if they breathe fire. I don't see why they couldn't. You have all kind of snakes and spitting cobras and all sorts of animals that have this ability to shoot out venom and stuff. I don't know why. Somehow they have the ability to ignite it. I don't think that's like too far out of the realm of possibility. So again, answers in Genesis, folks. Go easy on me. All right. But yeah, Satan is a reptilian, or he is. Let me go back to this real quick before I answer this question. Speaking of, why did Satan come in the form of a serpent in the garden? So when we think about Satan and we think about the attributes that we see in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, it seems to me that he was the anointed cherub that covers. And when you see other pictures of the cherubs in cherubim and seraphim in Isaiah 6, and then the beginning of Ezekiel, you have the four-faced angels. One had the face of an ox, the eagle, etc. I think Satan he represented the reptilian class, or the species, whatever that is, of beings, right? So I think that was why he associated with that, and he was able to possess this snake to communicate with Eve. He didn't have to talk with vocal cords. I think Adam and Eve probably were very easily able to telepathically communicate with animals. And I think we'll have that ability going forward into heaven. I believe that we'll have our pets there with us, or that we will see them again in the kingdom age, and that we'll be able to talk to them in a way that it's not like verbally talking to them, but we'll be able to understand each other in a way we can't do it right now. So from Melissa, question: the Anglican Church AC split. The King of England was the former head. King Chuck just prayed with the Pope. The AC is seated in Rwanda now. Please give your take on possible ramifications. Okay, so I think the Anglican Church has long since set sail off of being a true biblical church in the way we would consider a group of believers that believe in salvation by grace through faith, and that's not of works, and that we believe. Now, the conservative side within the Anglican Church, it seems, has now broken away and now is headquartered with Rwanda. And we know right now there's a great war going on in Rwanda by Boko Haram and these other Muslim groups attacking and killing Rwandan Christians, like in Nigeria as well, and in the thousands. I mean, it's massive persecution against Christians right now. And so I don't know specifically what the ramifications are with the Anglican Church splitting like that, but I think throughout history, what we've seen is that you have two kind of divisions within a church. You either have a splitting of a group where one group becomes so corrupt that the true believers inside that group break away, and they don't want to be associated with that church. We saw that with the Protestant Reformation. And then within the Protestant side, all the splinter groups that kind of came out of that, they've all broken away from each other. And sometimes those groups are breaking because they have doctrinal disputes. Sometimes it's the good people stay, and then the bad group that want to promote heresy or some type of heretical beliefs, they break off and start their own little kind of groups. And we've seen plenty of examples of both. In this particular instance, given the sole purpose of the Anglican Church as being an alternative to the Roman Catholic Church, the fact that now King Chuck is bringing that back together seems like the more conservative side of that group said, "Nah, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of us being Anglican." But we've seen churches do this over homosexual ordinations, where they ordain like gay priests and lesbian priests, things like that. You've got, I want to say it was the Methodist Church. Didn't the Methodist United Methodist broke away, or I don't know. We're starting to see this splitting and dividing of all these groups because of the collapsing of Western civilization. That Judeo-Christian roots are eroding. And I think at this point that there's probably more true born-again believers inside of the Rwandan African version of the Anglican Church than what's remaining in Europe. So it just seems like it's par for the course for what we've seen with churches and denominations and how they split apart. They either split apart because they see so much corruption that they don't want to be associated with that anymore. So they break away from that group, the main group, and start their own. Or it's the main group, the solid core group is here. You've got people that want to promote a heresy, some variation of a heresy, and they break away to start their own splinter group off. So I don't know. I don't think King Chuck is the Antichrist. I don't think he is it at all. I think he is maybe one of his sons, or I don't know, somebody else, but not him. He's way too old now. He's got the personality of a wet newspaper. So I just don't see him being this charismatic leader that's going to bring the whole world together. Okay, from Mike A. Do you think we'll see the Apostle John talking to the elder when we are in heaven, when Jesus takes the scroll? You know what? I kind of think we will. And maybe that's why he's confused, because for him at that time, he's still coming out of the first century. And he's like, who are all these people? Like, you're going to have Christians for the last 2,000 years of all different kinds of stripes and walks of life and haircuts. I don't know how that's all going to look up there, but like, he's just like, who are all these people? But he's coming out of the first century when the church was still in its infancy. And we're all looking at him like, hey, there's John. And he's like, what? I don't get what's going on here. So I don't know. But that'll be interesting to see. Squid the Hippo, do you think 2024 was our last election? And since there's a history of amending the Constitution, do you think it actually could pass for Trump to have a third term? Oh, man. Okay, so I kind of think it's the last election. Yes. I don't know what Steve Bannon has talked about this. He seems to be the only one talking about this publicly, at least, that Trump's going to run and win the third term. But we know that this has happened in the past with Franklin Roosevelt, et cetera. He ran 4 times and won 4 times. So the 22nd Amendment was supposed to fix that, prevent that from happening again. Is that written in stone by the finger of God? No, it's a constitution. Or it's an amendment that could be amended. So I think there could be a requisite crisis that keeps him in power for some reason. The whole idea of not changing horses in the middle of the stream or something along those lines. But do I think he's the last U.S. president? I think he's the last U.S. president. Edward McKelvey, question. A scientist named Warren Weston has said that they have tokenized the things they put into our bodies, giving them like ownership of our bodies. Any thoughts? Yeah, I mean, everything that can be tokenized will be tokenized. Anything that can be connected to the internet will be connected to the internet, including the human body. And the more that we understand about the human body, in particular DNA, we're basically, in a way, we're kind of like walking thumb drives, with endless storage capabilities. In a day and age when everything is all about storage and digital storage, the fact that our bodies can store this, and not just our human body, but like diamonds, diamonds, stones, all kinds of things can store information in ways that we're just now discovering when we break things down to the nano the nano level or the molecular level, we're able to start storing data into things. So I do think that it is going to get down to the cyber physical. Everything is going to be technologically driven to go inside of the human body. And I think that the culmination of all this technology, I mean, I don't care what we're talking about, but the absolute culmination, the greatest technological advancement that's going to happen in our age of humanity is going to be the mark of the beast. And whatever that mark looks like, it is going to be able to do things for people. They're going to want this thing in their body. It's going to give them that much of an advantage over somebody that doesn't have it. And if you could put this mark on your hand or your forehead and you could go from 100 IQ to like a 500 IQ, who wouldn't take that? I mean, clearly we wouldn't take that because we know what that leads to, but like people that don't read the Bible, don't care about prophecy, any of that stuff, they're just going to be like, oh yeah, absolutely, give it to me. So I think we're seeing that, and I think that's what will happen. So yeah. Elizabeth asked, what are your thoughts on 3i Atlas? I think I kind of went through that pretty exhaustively, but I think, again, if Satan is going to keep throwing these things near the earth with increasing rapidity, because he doesn't know when the rapture is, he just knows it's close. He hears us talking about it. He knows he was there 2,000 years ago, so he knows exactly when Christ was crucified. He knows exactly when he was born. He knows that this is right around the same time because God has been doing things in these like 2,000-year increments and stuff. So mimicking or, mirroring the days of creation. So I think he's going to keep throwing things near the earth because he needs that ready-made distraction and excuse for why these people disappeared. Ghoster, question, incoming Black Swan. Incoming Black Swan. I'm not sure what that's in reference to unless it's talking about 3i Atlas or some asteroid comet that's passing the Earth. Mr. Bowley, what do we do about digital IDs and central bank digital currencies? Like people say they won't comply, but then what? Do we just live off the land and leave our home? Will we be raptured before that even happens? So in terms of the digital IDs, that's already in full swing. Just go to the airport, fly anywhere. You'll see that. In terms of central bank digital currencies, again, we're at the end of this third industrial revolution. And you think about these revolutions kind of overlapping each other like this. So we're at the very tippy end, the far end of this third industrial revolution and well into the fourth. We just need something that kind of severs that connection back to the third and fully gets us into the fourth. And I think it's going to be some economic crisis. And, like I mentioned about the White House and then the ballroom and all that kind of stuff. I know that, he has brought inflation down a little bit. I know that he's working to, open up energy exports and pipelines, et cetera, all that stuff that needed to happen like 10 years ago. I just think it's a little too late for all that to really make a difference now. And I think you and I feel that, right? You feel that when you go to Walmart and you look at your receipt from what you paid for, 3 or 4 years ago versus that same receipt, what it costs now. And the cost of things have exponentially grown. And it's crazy. I don't even think about it anymore. If I go to the grocery store and just get like a small basket full of stuff and it's like $50, I think, okay, that's kind of normal now. That would be insane, 5 years ago. So I think something is going to have to give. Now, do I think we're going to have to live off the land and do all that stuff? I don't know. I mean, that could happen now if a strong enough solar flare hit the earth and fried all our systems. I mean, we'd basically be back in the 1800s, temporarily, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think things are going to keep progressing. And I think that the next major crisis that's going to happen is the rapture of the church. So I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of little things will happen in between then and now. I mean, obviously none of us saw COVID happening in 2020 and the world shutting down, but it did, and we kind of rolled through that, and then all of a sudden, at the least likely of all the possibilities that could happen is that Trump turns his head just a little bit in that Pennsylvania president rally. Was it July 11th? He just turns his head like an inch or two, and that bullet whizzes by and clips his ear. Think about how different the world would be right now if he didn't turn his head. I mean, we would be in a very different reality right now. So I think the reality in right now, it feels almost like this alternate reality. So, all right. I think had Kamala Harris won, yeah, we would definitely be living off the grid right now because things would be on fire, going off the cliff. I mean, at full speed. So, from Annie, is the Real ID we all had to get part of a U.S. digital ID? Do you think? It's probably feeding into the system that they're building right now, but I do think that the digital ID that they're talking about, it's gonna end up becoming part of the mark of the beast. So we're looking at it from like instead of looking at the whole forest, we're looking at kind of individual leaves and the veins on the leaves right now. We're trying to make sense of what does this look like in the big picture? But we're getting fed this little bit at a time. Real ID here, central bank digital currencies over here, Bitcoin over here, blockchain over here. So it's all this stuff, and it's kind of too much for us to kind of process. But if we would just step back and look at it through the lens of Bible prophecy and see the trajectory of where everything is moving, it's all culminating to this one thing, this mark of the beast. And just like God is. I'm kind of the mind now that God is going to seal people inside of the 70th week to one degree or the other. And once they're sealed, they cannot take the mark of the beast, just like the 144,000 are going to be sealed by God. Now they're mentioned as being sealed. That doesn't mean that somebody that's sealed can't be killed, because I think that we're told very clearly that there's going to be so many martyrs inside of the 70th week that their number is going to be incalculable. Like, you're not going to be able to count how many come out of the tribulation as martyrs. And clearly, we're told in Revelation 7 that there's these 144,000, and then there's this massive number of saints that are martyred that come out of the tribulation. And then in the next chapter, we're told that there's this army that's marching, or that's on horsemen, that is this demonic army that's 200 million. So it seems like that number in Revelation 7 is going to be a bigger number than what we see in Revelation 8, which is 200 million. So there should be this massive number that really is going to be mind-boggling that come out, that are martyred, but they're not protected through it. They're just sealed by God so that they cannot take the mark of the beast. And I'm not super dogmatic on that. I don't know. I'm just mulling this around in my head, but that's the whole purpose of the mark. Is Satan is trying to mimic this mark where he permanently seals people into his worship, but by so doing that, they're guaranteed the lake of fire. So it's once they take the mark, they're damned forever, and there's no escaping from that. From Brooke, do you think these are just the beginning of the contractions? I think we're probably at the end of the beginning of these contractions, to kind of paraphrase Churchill. We're not at the end, but we're at the beginning of the end, I believe. So I think that we're in this end game, and so we're moving straight from this into the only thing that's left is the real contractions and the real pains that are going to start coming upon the world to test those that live upon the earth. And so there's other things that drive this as well. You've got a real concerted effort by billionaires and by these private agencies who are rapidly trying to get people to move off planet, to go colonize the moon, and then from the moon to Mars, and et cetera, et cetera. But when you look at all the judgments in Revelation, it's, God is talking about those who dwell upon the earth and the earth dwellers. And it leads me to believe that somehow they are not able to get off planet, and they're trying to get this done. They're trying to get this moon colonization going by the end of the decade. So, it seems like it's just one of those things that's factoring in as well. that you've got all these kind of external pressures that are driving timelines, and God's either not going to let them go to the moon or let them go to Mars. And if he's got to destroy Mars with these comets, he could easily destroy Mars with one of these comets. Maybe as 3I Atlas goes back out, and it as it gets to so from the Earth to the Sun, it's 1 AU, or 1 astronomical unit. So it's like 93 million miles, and that's how we kind of measure distances to get perspective on how far things are apart. And so as 3I Atlas goes back out after perihelion, and it's going on its outbound trajectory, when it gets to between 2 and 3.5 AU, it's going to be going back through the ecliptic plane. So here's the ecliptic plane, here's 3I Atlas. It's going to be going back through it, down into it, in this massive asteroid belt. And who's to say that that doesn't just cause those things to shoot out in all different directions, and it could absolutely wreck Mars, or it could wreck the moon. And you could do something to where it makes interstellar travel absolutely impassable, because now you've got twice as many asteroids or whatever rocks floating around, and it's so dangerous that you can't go now. So I think humans are going to be trapped on the Earth, but they sure are trying to get off as quickly as possible. Okay. Questions are closed. Okay. From Mr. Bowley, last one. Do you think we'll go through the physical persecution and be arrested prior to the rapture? I think had Kamala Harris won, yes, I think that would absolutely be the case. I think it was happening during Biden's administration. You have these grandmothers that are silently praying outside of abortion clinics that are being thrown in jail for years. All the J6 protesters, that really didn't do anything other than even possibly, some of them didn't even trespass, and they were rounded up and thrown in jail, just with these mock trials and everything else. I mean, it was ridiculous. So had they won, I absolutely think that would be the case. But for whatever reason, God brought Trump back in, and we know that according to Acts 17:26, and I think Daniel 4:17, that God is the one that sets the boundaries and times of nations, and he's the one that appoints leaders and raises up leaders and takes leaders down. So it was his plan to have Trump in office, and he's fulfilling some kind of prophetic plan that we just need to let it play out and see how God is working through him to achieve his ends. And I'm not saying that everything that Trump does is good. Again, I have a lot of issues with what Trump is doing with Israel in particular, but it seems to make sense that he's extending this time for us to continue to get the gospel out. And, just think about how many people came to salvation with the death of Charlie Kirk. You have the young generation, just in thousands, have started to go to church again, have given their life to the Lord. And so he allows these things to take place because he's long suffering. He doesn't want anybody to perish. He doesn't want anybody to go to hell. And so, do I think things are going to get rough before then? Absolutely. And it's already rough around the world. It's rough in Africa. It's rough in the Middle East. It's rough in Asia. It's rough, and even in Latin America and places. So, God is allowing this time right now to bring in the last of this, whatever that would culminate with the fullness of the Gentiles in Romans 11:25. Whatever that fullness of the Gentiles means, I think it means the full number of Gentiles. It could mean that when persecution hits the Gentiles to such a degree because of their faith in Christ, that could mean that as well. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could look at it, but whatever that is, I think we're there around the world. We're kind of the last holdout in the world, because even in the UK, in Ireland, in Canada, in all these places, in Australia, places that had been bastions of Judeo-Christian society and had been, governed by the rule of law. Now they've just given themselves over to these Muslim hordes and to the Islamists and to the progressive woke Marxist agendas. All those things have just destroyed these cultures. And those cultures are turning very quickly against the Jews and the Christians. So for whatever reason, God has allowed us, he's extending this time out. And as long as we keep getting the gospel out there and we keep sharing the love of Christ with the lost and dying world, I think God is going to, make the best use of this time through us. And we just need to be faithful in doing what he's called us to do. So, okay. Little light. So if you guys haven't checked out John Burke, he does a lot of stuff with near-death experiences. I caught it. He came up on my feed today again, and I was listening to part of his discussion. He was talking about hell, and he brought up a good point that I hadn't really thought about before. But so John Burke has studied like 1,100 cases, or I don't know, it's an insane amount of cases with these people with near-death experiences. And the way he describes it is that, we know in Hebrews, I think 9:27, that as appointed man wants to die in judgment. And he called it, and I like the phrase, liminal. And there's certain parts of the death process where a person's not 100% dead. Or he describes in it that in all the cases that he talks to, of these instances where people, they physically their brain stopped functioning or their heart stopped beating, and they're clinically dead. You remember The Princess Bride, where they're going to revive Wesley, the Prince, whatever his name, Prince Wesley, and they take him to Billy Crystal and the other witches or whatever they are, wizards or something. And they're like, he's not 100% dead. He's mostly dead, And anyways, I think that each of those cases that John was describing, when he's talking to those people, he goes, there is like this line that they knew that if they crossed it, that was it. There was no going back from whatever that point was. But it makes sense when you have people that aren't saved and they talk about these near-death experiences where clinically they're undeniably clinically dead, that they're somehow brought back or resuscitated back to life. And at that point where they get into this state of death, they see the light at the end of the tunnel, or whatever the case is, and they're resuscitated before anything like negative, good or bad happens to them, right? So all they're catching just a glimpse of that. But if it goes on for any length of time, this one guy in particular that had died, he was an atheist professor. He was in Italy on some kind of a teaching tour or something, and he was actively anti-God. I mean, just he did his best to persuade people against God. And he had his appendix burst, or something happened to his stomach, and he couldn't get treated in time. So he's in a hospital, but it's on the weekend, and so they couldn't get a doctor to get the surgery done, and he dies there in the hospital bed. And he said the minute that he didn't even think he died. He didn't even realize he died. He felt better than he had ever felt before. And he's standing there and he's looking at himself in the bed, but he doesn't recognize himself. And he's got these other people calling him saying, hey, come over here. We're waiting for you, blah, blah, blah. And they seem friendly at first. So he goes with them. And the further they go down this hall, the more wicked they become and more evil. And they just start punching him and hitting him and pulling his hair. And then it gets really graphic in the sense that they start to literally trying to tear him apart piece by piece, like in a zombie movie or something. And he starts feeling in his chest, like, pray to God, pray to God. And so 3 times it happens. And the first 2 times he's like, I don't even believe in God. How can I pray to God I don't believe in? But by the 3rd time, he just tries to say something that he was trying to remember something from his childhood. He said something like, my country, 'tis of thee, God shed his light on thee, or something he was remembering. But when he said God, the people, these demons or whatever they were attacking him kind of, jump back. And then they said, if you do that again, it started, we'll make it even worse. You don't even know what pain is, blah, blah, blah. So he just kept saying it because it kept pushing them back. And then he finally prayed to God to save him. And he saw like a prick of light in the distance, and it started coming toward him like a bullet. And then he was delivered, But I think a lot of people that get resuscitated too early, they only get a glimpse of the tunnel, the light at the end. They don't get the full picture of it. And so they come out of it thinking, oh, well, there's nothing, or there's just a tunnel at the end, with light at the end. And so that's where we get all these kind of perspectives of different views of like what happens the second you die. But he took all of those cases and he started looking at all the things that were common amongst them and all the things that were disparate amongst them. But the things that were common was this idea that there was a boundary that once they crossed it, they knew that they would never come back from that. And so, I don't know, that the NDE comment has kind of triggered me to think about that. But it's pretty fascinating idea. The government shutdown and the end of SNAP EBT is by the deep state to crash the dollar. Could be. I think if you live in a big city, they don't pass this continuing budget or whatever. I'd be very careful buying groceries if you live in a big city. They're talking about, basically mobbing people that are walking out with their groceries, mobbing them and stealing their groceries. So, just like I always say, head on a swivel, always be looking around, knowing where your environments are, knowing who's around you, constantly being vigilant, because times are going to become perilous, and they already are perilous, but it's going to get worse, and it's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse until we're delivered out of here. How much of that, do I think I need to, go hide out in a bunker or whatever until the Lord returns? I don't think so. I don't think God wants us to be, living like that, because our goal is to be out in the world being salt and light, and not hiding ourselves away, sequestering ourselves away like monks, in a monastery. All right. I think that's it, right, guys? That's all the questions. That's all the. I guess robbing people is better than going to food pantry. Yeah, I mean, even food pantries are going to be. I mean, it could get pretty bad here before the very end, but I don't know. It just, in my gut, I feel like the way God has orchestrated things, and it all kind of goes back to that one moment where Trump turns his head. And I'm not saying that Trump is the solution to all this. I'm just saying that the world, if we could pinpoint to one specific time where, if that one thing had happened, I mean, this would be a very different reality right now. It's that moment right there where he turns his head even he acknowledges it. And I don't know why he is, saying all this insane stuff like he doesn't know if he's going to heaven. I mean, if you know, right? I don't think he's saved. I just think he's still got that worry in him. Because you know what? That's a good example, right? Because Trump doesn't understand that salvation is by grace through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. Trump is trying to do all these things by his works, and he's trying his darndest to get this peace deal in the Middle East, even if it means making a deal with death and hell in the process, which is, Islam basically. And I mean, it's insane. It's insane that he thinks that he's going to be able to bring about some kind of eternal peace or whatever, all that nonsense he's talking about. Ugh. All right, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, moderators, for collecting all the questions. Again, I'll be on with Pastor Kurt, on Thursday from 2 to 4 Central, 12 to 2 Pacific. I think that's right. And then I'm toying with the idea of Friday, doing this kind of a running live stream on Friday, maybe earlier in the day. And moderators, I'm not going to hold you to be in there. If you, I mean, that's kind of not a day I typically go live, but I'll let you guys know in Discord if I do or not. But yeah, we have some amazing moderators here. Thank you guys. So more to follow on that, but definitely Thursday I'll be on with Pastor Kurt. So look forward to that. And then also, you know, we're coming up on Halloween or Samhain, whatever you want to call it. Definitely a heightened period of spiritual activity going on in the world, demonic activity. So, you know, again, head on a swivel. Just, you know, always be praying, always be prayed up. If you check out Misha's video, she's got that saying at the end of her videos, you know, be prayed up, booted up. Oh, wait, what is it? How's it go? Suit up, boot up, get your rapture robes on or something. I wish I had some kind of saying like that. I'm not crafty enough to think of something like that, but suit up, boot up, be prayed up, you know, all that kind of stuff. But let me read this. A friend of mine shared this with me, and I, man, it really spoke to me that day. So I needed to hear it. Oh, and check out Pastor Gary's sermon from Sunday. I think I posted on Telegram or whatever, but no, it was a good sermon. Go to his Sunday sermon there. Man, that was good. I needed to hear that. This is from Psalm 51:17. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. These, O God, you will not despise. And I think a lot of us these days are going through a lot of hard times, emotional, relational, physical, financial, you know, you name it, people are going through it. There was a girl earlier, a young girl that was involved in a car accident. Priscilla, I think was her name. And I mean, I was prayed for her before I even started, but it's going to be becoming more and more the norm. And one of the things that doesn't get dealt with a lot is this isolation that we feel. And I know a lot of you, this is your church, you know, this is your fellowship where you come to just kind of hang out with other believers, like-minded believers, because your churches aren't talking about any of this stuff and they're kind of tone deaf to what's going on in the world. But know that God hears you and that he's with you and that he's walking with you. And, you know, I've been in some dark places in my life, and I know that many of you have as well. So just turn it over to the Lord. And I know it sounds cheesy, but think about that poster, you know, when you're walking on the beach and you got the two sets of footprints and you're asking God, where were you? And God's like, well, that's when I was carrying that one set of footprints is all that's left. Because that's when I was carrying you. God's never going to leave you nor forsake you. He loves you more than your parents. Even if your parents were the best parents on the planet, he loves you more than they love you. So just know that he wants to have that relationship, and he wants you to come to him with a broken and contrite heart. That is what that is where we need to be when we come to him. Because I guarantee you, even if you have your life all together, there's you don't. not in God's standards per se, but come to him and just be honest with him and tell him you love him, and that you know you need. It's hard to be faith. It's hard to live by faith. I trust me, 2 years of looking for this job, and you know the rapture could happen next week, and it might be a moot point. I don't know, but it's hard. I trust you guys. I know it's hard. So just continue to pray, and God will bring people in your life. And what I've noticed is at the most opportune times that I don't recognize, but God is recognizing these moments in my life where he'll speak through somebody else to come talk to me, say, hey, I felt like I needed to give this to you. Like the Lord impressed upon my heart that I need to give this to you. that to me is how I know that the God is not abandoning us. He doesn't need to speak to me in a burning bush. And as much as I wish he would speak to me audibly and just give me vectors for my life and start to tell me, hey, all right, turn here, left, go right, do this, do that. This is part of the blessing that we're going to have. You know, remember when Thomas, when Jesus told Thomas, you know, you've seen me, you know, you felt my hand and my scars. I'm paraphrasing all this. But blessed are those that believe and haven't seen. How much more blessed they're going to be. So just folks, just keep hanging on. We're almost there. I know it's tough for a lot of folks. So just keep looking up. Don't let this world get you down. Just remember, this is the most or the closest to hell you'll ever see. If you're a born again believer, this is the closest to hell you'll ever be. And for the unbeliever, this is the closest to heaven they'll ever be. So let's try and be the best that we can in terms of sharing the gospel with other people and being the salt and light that God's called us to be. So with all that, God bless you all. Thank you. And I will see you guys on Thursday with Pastor Kurt. So take care. God bless, and Maranatha.